Do you struggle with knowing God's will for your life? As I was growing up in the church, I was often really confused about this concept, particularly at times when I had to make big decisions like going to university or picking a career. I was taught that I had to surrender my will to God. But I also heard expressions like I had to crucify my will, and not my will, but only God's. So I presumed that that meant that I had to get rid of all of my desires, all of my interests, and wait for God to give me His. So that if, while praying and asking for God's direction, if I did get desires and interests that seemed very appealing or even fun, it was definitely the flesh and had to be crucified and disposed of. So that meant that while I was seeking God for direction, every thought that came up that seemed good, I got rid of. So I drew a blank, and then I presumed that God wasn't saying anything and wasn't giving me direction, so I had to just go ahead and make a decision on my own and hope for the best. Now I realize how wrong I was. You see, when we come into the kingdom and become Christians, yes, we have to surrender our entire lives, including our will, to the Lordship of Jesus. But then, once we're Christians, the Holy Spirit comes to live inside of us. We have the mind of Christ. We are seated with Christ in heaven, and we now have the ability to hear God's voice. And as His children, God is always speaking to us, giving us His ideas, His thoughts. He puts His desires into our hearts so that we naturally desire the same thing, so that we can carry out His will. The problem is, if you've been raised in the same environment I've been raised in, when we get these desires that God in fact put into us, if they seem fun and appealing and interesting, we assume they're of the flesh and they need to be disposed of and crucified because they just sound too good. But when we do that, we're actually working against God's will. We're getting rid of the thoughts that He gave us that would lead us into His desires for our life. And in fact, when we do that, we are crucifying the new man, our new nature, which is designed to hear God's voice, think like He does, feel like He does, and act and to do His will. We're told to crucify the old man. We have to stop crucifying the new man. So remember, when you're seeking for God's direction, remember that He is constantly speaking to you. He is putting His desires into your heart so you will feel and think like He does. And as you get more accustomed to hearing His voice, you'll be able to take action, make decisions, and be confident that you are in His will. To live a transformed life, you need to stop crucifying your new man and listen to God's voice and take action with confidence. Now I want to hear from you. How has God led you, and how have you picked up His direction for your life? Just leave your comments in the box below, because we'd love to hear your testimonies too. And if this is your first visit here, you need to get my free self-assessment guide. And to do that, just subscribe to my weekly email newsletter by filling out the subscription form, and you know where it is. It's always right there. And I'll talk to you again next week, but this week, listen to God's voice and go with His direction.